Howdy folks, I want to welcome you to the campfire, a place where we can just sit and tell a story or two and we can ponder on the unusual and mysterious things that occur out here in the wild. I'll tell you some of my stories and well, you can tell me some of yours. This is Clay Steele. Come join me around the campfire here beneath the stars. Grab a cup of coffee or a cold drink and let's talk about our stories. Can't wait. Howdy folks, Clay Steele here. Come on over, get yourself a cup of coffee. I'll throw another log on and we can just sit here by the campfire and enjoy each other's company. Share a story or two. In fact, there is a story I would like to share with you about something that happened about 10 years ago. I was working on a ranch in the Northwest. If you know that area, you know it's a lot of thick forest and green, lush undergrowth. Usually a fair amount of water in creeks flowing west to the coast. So I was hired to do some springtime road work and ground clearing. That's the time of the year that everything is just getting started. The animals are being born, the birds are courting, and the plants and the insects are changing phases. It's really a great time to be there. Now this ranch was going to need a fair amount of work. Several roads were washed out and there was more than a few fallen trees on those roads. I figured it'd take about 3 weeks and we'd be done. So we camped on site. There was an old cabin there, old owner's cabin. There was kind of a clearing area. It had a creek running through there. It was good cold water, so that's where we camped. I also would like to note that there was a great rock fire ring with a grill and a rack for cooking. It was just perfect. You know how I like those campfires. It was great. Well, work progressed pretty well for the first week or so. You know, the crew, we were all experienced and seasoned mountain workers, so there wasn't a lot of learning to start with. I was starting to think that we might finish a little earlier than 3 weeks that we'd kind of set aside. So about 10 days in, gosh, it was about 2:30 in the morning, and we all woke up with the most horrific noises in the woods. Probably 150, 200 yards out of camp upstream on the creek. There was bellowing and crashing and huge thudding sounds. I never heard anything like this before, and judging by the others' expressions, neither had they. Whatever it was mad. That's what it sounded like. This went on for 2 or 3 minutes at least, and we just kind of stood there. It became apparent that there were at least 2 animals in a fight. That's what it sounded like. And the way they were going at it, it sure seemed that they were big, and they were trying to kill each other. Then just as suddenly as it started, it went dead silent. Well, we didn't hear anything. Well, none of us had moved much during that fight, and we weren't rushing upstream when it stopped. We were all just asking each other what it was, and we're trying to figure it out. Well, 3 of us had come out of our beds with a gun in the hand, and now the other 2 went back to their tents and armed themselves. That's how shook up we were. We weren't able to sleep. We stoked the fire and shined our flashlights into the woods in all directions, looking for reflections from eyes. You know, it's a good indication there's something there. We kept that up till about 5 a.m. and it began to get dawn, and, well, we cooked a nervous breakfast. None of us had too much of an appetite. When we had all done our morning chores and we were ready to go to work, we decided to have 3 of us walk up the creek bottom. The other 2 would stay in camp. Now, that was our best plan. We were all armed pretty well, and the 3 of us being experienced hunters were good with our guns, so up the creek we went. We were taking our time walking upstream. We were 3 abreast, about 30 foot apart. And life had returned to the forest, and all the regular birds and the insect noises were all back in the air, and you wouldn't know anything had gone on the night before. About 150 yards from camp, where we expected to find it, was the battle site. What we saw was an area of probably 50 foot by 50 foot that looked nothing like the forest around it. Trees were scarred with chunks knocked out of them. The ground was turned up, and the pine needles, they were in large clumps on the ground. Rocks in the creek were turned and moved, most of them larger than any of we could pick up, you know, and they were just, it looked like something had gone on there. We looked over the site pretty well. Well, there were no clear footprints because of all the pine needles and the way it was set up. We could tell by the impressions in the ground that whatever was here had at least an 18-inch long foot and was able to reach about 10 foot up the tree. That's about where the bark was ripped out, highest points. I was getting a pretty clear picture of what was there, but why all the destruction didn't make sense. And it sure as hell did sound like two of them going at it. Well, we worked through the day that day and for the rest of the week, and by Sunday we figured we were done. We hadn't heard or seen anything out of the ordinary since that night, and we were looking. So we broke camp and we went our separate ways. It was a few years later, while telling this story around the campfire, that one of the campers there told me he had heard of a similar occurrence. He says the man that told him about it was sure that what happened was the classic struggle between good and evil. He says when a Sasquatch becomes evil and is sort of as we do, though good often prevails, sometimes evil will win out to survive another day. I'm not sure who won that night in the mountains, but I'm hoping it was the good over the evil. Well, we're headed up the ranch to do a little work, and we'll be back in a bit, a week or so. In the meantime, why don't you think about the stories that you have from your campfire experiences and your outdoor experiences, and I'll do the same. In fact, I'll be making a few more stories, and we'll talk. When we get back together, we'll trade stories again. I do enjoy that. Well, you take care.